So it's my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Morris, the president of Conservation International, one of our new POs in the just this year, I believe, right? A member of GEO, and I'll turn the mic over to her to run it from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. So good afternoon, everyone. As Steve said, my name is Jennifer Morris. I am thrilled to be here as a new participating organization of GEO. I understand that the last panel was very lively, and we have a tough act to follow. But as you can see, we have reoriented the gender balance. So I have a nice, strong female contingent. So no pressure, ladies. So I want to just start off by thanking my panelists for being here. We have three what I will call absolute experts in this space, representing three of the largest institutions globally dedicated to international development. So first we have Mrs. Haishan Fu from the World Bank, and she's going to introduce herself. I'm not going to do her justice, but basically her title is the Director of the Development Data Group at the World Bank. Then second, our one male panelist today is Mr. Nakata-san, Ryosuke Nakata-san, who is the Chief Representative of the U.S. Office of JICA, of the government of Japan. And then finally, we have Carrie Stokes, who is, I understand, the first geographer of USAID. So together, these three institutions represent over $100 billion almost a year in international development funding. So these guys are clearly critical players in the use of geospatial technology and international development. So we're really looking forward to hearing from them and really understanding how geospatial technology can be used to make effective decisions. As we all know, since our planet is changing so rapidly, we have got to make sure that every single dollar of taxpayers from around the world is used as effectively as possible, and geospatial technology enables us to do that in the best way possible. So we're going to have a dynamic panel here. We're going to go through some introductions and learn from these three individuals about how their institutions use this technology. And then we're going to open up to the floor for any interventions, and then we're going to be doing lots and lots of questions and discussion. So without further ado, may I ask Haishan Fu to please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how the World Bank is using geospatial technology in its investments.
Thank you very much. Great. Yeah, thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure to join you all. I'm working at the bank as the director of the development data. And I hope you didn't read my bio too closely, because you will notice that by training, I'm a demographer and not an expert on Earth observation data. But I dare to come because I realize I don't need to come to impress you, but rather to really come with an open attitude to learn from all of you. And at the same time, we do have so many colleagues at the bank who have been engaged in really learning about Earth observation data's potential and trying to apply them to solve some practical development challenges that we face when we're dealing with our client countries. So as you know, World Bank is a international development agency with a very clear mission. That is to eradicate extreme poverty and promote shared prosperity in a sustainable way. And we really share with GEO's commitment to support the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement on climate change, as well as the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And our work program nicely covers all the 8 so-called societal benefit areas that GEO has identified, from agricultural food security to land and urban, water, health, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, you know, what GEO as a community has been able to explore, to develop, and put into application is really something guide what the bank can really learn from and then use to help guide our support for countries. What we do with EO data is in 3 very distinct but related areas. One is in our knowledge and research work. So we need to be informed by the new insight that we can gain from EO information in guiding our operations with countries as well as in producing public goods. Just to give you a quick flavor, in terms of public goods, in the last 12 months, our team has been working with Facebook's connectivity lab to produce more up-to-date and more detailed population maps. I'm a demographer. I'm always interested in population dynamics, but in so many countries, given how censuses are being carried out so infrequently and how vital registration systems are not functioning very well, we really don't have proper, reliable population estimates, the basic data. But by combining EO information, satellite imageries with census or survey data, tapping into our experience, we were able to help generate more detailed, more recent, more reliable, and more up-to-date population maps that can guide more insightful decision-making. Operations, infrastructure, electricity accessibility is a huge priority. And in Africa, we have been able to develop Africa Electricity Grid Explorers, which is becoming such a detailed map of electricity infrastructure by combining geospatial information through machine learning. That really gave us so much insight. So that's the kind of thing we're experimenting with, and we want to really learn more by really trying to connect the potential of geospatial Earth operational data with the particular challenges we're facing.
Great. Thank you so much, Haishan. Now, Nakata-san, turning to you. So as the chief representative of JICA here in the U.S., can you tell us a little bit about how JICA is using this key data to make development decisions?
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryosuke Nakata of JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, Chief Rep of the USA Office. And usually when I discuss, in some kind of, this kind of arena, I expect everybody to know what JICA is. But probably, my area and your area is pretty different. So maybe let me explain a little bit about what JICA is. As this name shows, JICA is the international development agency under the Japanese government, just like USAID. We are under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, government of Japan, and we are extending various type of development assistance in a variety of countries. Although we are in Asia, and the major focus is definitely Asian countries, but our operation is not limited only to Asia. We have so much, the wide the area network of our overseas offices, and we have so much of cooperation with African countries, Latin American countries, and Eastern European countries. They are mostly graduated from the level eligible for financing, but we still have a certain level of collaboration assistance with European countries too. And some of you who may have the image that JICA is a kind of technical assistance agency, that was until maybe 10 years ago. Almost 10 years ago, we had some kind of reorganization in Japanese architecture, and we kind of joined the former JICA, which specializes in the technical assistance, with another agency, what's called the JBIC, extending a concessional loan to developing countries. And we are now able to combine various types of assistance modality, starting from the technical assistance like dispatching experts, or the training seminars, or even volunteers like Peace Corps, and financial assistance, like including both grant assistance and concessional loan assistance, like the World Bank does. And we also extend various types of emergency relief activities, like recent the hurricane damage for Latin countries. We do those kind of things. So by combining those various forms of assistance modality, we are trying to find the best kind of mix of assistance, the kind of project, the program, how best we can assist our partner countries to achieve those sustainable development, poverty reduction, those kind of the development goals. And since this is a kind of discussion, this is JICA, and my position is the chief rep of the Washington, D.C. office, but of course we don't do any development project in the United States. But the main responsibility of my office is to have a collaboration with various development partners like USAID, US government agency, and World Bank, IMF, IDB, those people. Try to, for the enhanced policy coordination, what kind of new approach is there. And as recently, the World Bank has, proposing to increase the activity in the science and technology. And so these, science and technology is another kind of new area that all the development agencies like World Bank, JICA, or USAID, to how best we can utilize those new technology in order to more effectively and efficiently assist our partner countries to achieve those development goals. But this satellite technology is kind of new area for us too. So I don't pretend that we have so many kind of list of exhaustive list of the examples. But lucky, the JICA has a kind of cooperation agreement with JAXA, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. They are the experts of this technology, and we are able to start a few kind of intervention with the collaboration with JAXA. Should I discuss a little bit more detail of the project, or maybe we should go later?
Maybe we hold off for now, and we can dive into that a bit more later.
And we have a few kind of examples of how we collaborated with JAXA's satellite technology to effectively intervene in development assistance. So maybe let's start here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So Carrie, tell us a little bit about USAID and how you're using this data, and maybe compare and contrast a little bit if it's different from what the World Bank and JICA is doing.
Sure. So I work with the U.S. Agency for International Development, and we are the lead foreign assistance agency for the U.S. government. We are working to reduce poverty and promote resilient democratic societies. We're working in nearly 100 countries around the world in all of the same sectors that we've just heard about: food security, health, disaster response, education, conflict mitigation. So I, as the chief geographer, lead a team of geographers and data analysts. We are embedded inside the walls of USAID. We're a fairly new experiment for the agency. USAID has been around for over 55 years, and we're coming up on our anniversary in November for having been in place for 6 years. So we are evolving with the technology and the power of being able to inform colleagues in Washington and around the world about where the hot spots of vulnerability actually are. Our whole reason for being is to use the geospatial technology, the Earth observation data, the demographic data, and analyze to better understand where the problems are. Of course, we want to know where we're working. That's the first question that everybody asks: where are we working? But the real question is, where should we be working? Are we working in the places that need it the most? So this team embedded inside the agency, called the Geo Center, is a new investment that USAID is making because we believe in the power of data and analytics and Earth observations and what technology can bring to age-old development problems. Why does this relate to GEO in this group? It's actually connected. In the early days when we were getting started, we heard this morning possibly 14 years ago, but officially 12 years ago, I happened to be asked to participate as the one lone person from my agency in some of the very first capacity building committee meetings of GEO and GEOS. I didn't know what it was. My supervisor sent me off to Brazil. I got to know other colleagues from around the world, and I was so impressed to see that they were really understanding that capacity needed to be built first before we could truly apply the power of this kind of information. So I started thinking, okay, how might we do that? Back here in Washington, I was already beginning to work on an idea. It was a program called Severe. Some of you may have heard about that. It was a partnership between USAID, the nation's development agency, and NASA, the nation's space agency. An unlikely partnership, but together we were able to formulate an idea to bring the best of science and technology from space that NASA knew to the nation's expertise in doing international development. That program still exists today. So The investment and the energy to be able to fund it in the beginning came because this was right around the time that GEO and GEOS were getting started, and that was the motivation for starting that program. After working and leading that program for about 7, 8 years, I realized, okay, I've been working for years now with the developing country counterparts, but actually I need to work with my own colleagues here inside my own agency for them to understand the power of this technology as well. They're very smart, they know their work well, but they had not yet been exposed to this opportunity. So that was the motivation to start what I would call a severe hub almost inside my own agency to have the expertise that we now have today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carrie. So picking up on that, we've talked a little bit about unlikely partnerships. The World Bank Facebook one is quite interesting. But let's talk a little bit about the need to really make the smartest decisions possible, as I mentioned in my intro, about where money should actually go. Tell us, if you could, Carrie, maybe starting with you, give us a specific example to give a flavor for how this data is being used to make decisions about international development flows.
Sure. I have a couple of examples. I'll give you one that's more recent from my team, the Geo Center, and it does involve location-based information. A few years ago in the United States, we were experiencing a crisis of migrant children coming from Central America across the border without their parents, undocumented, on very treacherous journeys, no guarantee that they would make it here safely. So this was a crisis internally to the country, but after some time we became very, very acutely aware that we needed to focus on what the reason for the migration. Why were parents sending their children on a treacherous journey that was very dangerous? What was the motivation behind this? What was the driver? My team got involved with this larger issue because we were able to combine data that was locally based in Central American countries about the location of origin from the children as they were crossing the border. We compared that to poverty data, and we mapped that in all of the 3 countries where this was happening, called the Northern Triangle in Central America. We also compared that to violent crime rates, homicides. And we compared it to where we were already working to address some of these issues as a development agency. What we saw was illuminating. It was the evidence that showed in Guatemala, the majority of the children were coming from areas of extreme poverty. But in Honduras, they were coming mostly from areas of high crime, high homicide rates. Safety was the #1 concern for families and for parents. So they were making these difficult decisions, thinking it's maybe a greater opportunity to send our kids on this other journey because where they were wasn't safe enough. Having that evidence affected decision-making at the highest levels of government in the U.S. That map, or those maps, informed decisions in our National Security Council who were discussing this issue. That information went to our Office of Management and Budget, OMB as we say, and it ultimately was shared with our Congress. It motivated our Congress to appropriate nearly $1 billion to address the issues in Central America. Little did I know when I started this team that we would be having an impact at that level. But it was reinforcing to us, as well as to our colleagues, that this kind of information, when visualized in simple form, that can convey the information's not so easy, but it's easily understood, can have very powerful impact on decisions at the highest level. Now I want to give you an example at a more local level. In the country of Nepal, for example, this is something that's one of the tools of the SERVIR program. Being able to take Earth observation information, looking at greenness index, looking at rainfall estimates, and looking at temperature, we are now creating regular products to better understand how we can compare what the current agricultural output can be across the country, and we compare that with historical data that the Ministry of Agriculture has shared. That gives us a sense now to understand what is happening now on average compared to the past. Do we look like we're going to have higher or lower agriculture production? having that kind of information is shared with the local village development councils at the district level and more granular. So you get the local people involved with being able to see this kind of information. It's directly affecting food assistance where it's needed. The World Food Program is using this, as well as local officials in the country of Nepal.
Great. Fantastic examples at different scales. So Haishan, I'd love to pick up on that and ask you a similar question related to the World Bank. I mean, you just heard Carrie give two fantastic examples. Do you have any examples within the World Bank's portfolio that really show the use of this technology to make better informed development decisions?
Thank you very much. Indeed, I think what Carrie shared of what USAID has been doing is very inspiring. And since she just mentioned Nepal, let me also relate to our experience there. In the range of work program World Bank is pursuing, one area is indeed to support countries in mitigating disaster risks and also prepare government to respond to disasters much more efficiently. And here we see, as the technology is evolving, how EO potential has been coming into this process. We are indeed integrating that much more proactively. For example, it's about using EO data, the satellite images, and combined with the ground truth information through surveys and other sources that provide the economic and social information. By combining the two, allow us to really help decide where resource should go, to what, and that help us to decide critically in a timely manner how we can respond to the people that are being affected. Another thing is, by combining those data, also allow us to do more rapidly the assessment of the damages caused and the economic loss, and that allow us to really do much better. Just recently, the bank experimented with combining EO information with the survey and administrative data to assess the Nepal 2015 earthquake. And what the results showed, the accuracy is about 90% of what we would do through a more regular post-disaster needs assessment, but in a much faster, timely manner. So that, if you think about what the time that we can save and can reach people, how many lives we can save, is really remarkable. Another example that we can see is that we all know how sea level rise has become such a threat to the low-lying coastal people living there. And by combining the EO information with, this is really about the potential of integrating EO information with the other kind of economic and social data, and we can use, such as land and agricultural land use and population and wetland information, we can estimate or quantify the vulnerability of people living in those areas with or without climate change. And those information really help to influence how IDA resource allocation is being made. So that's another very concrete example that by channeling the right financing to the right place, so we can help mitigate some of the impact.
Great, thank you. So I want to pick up on a point, Carrie, that you made about getting this data at the local level. And you know, I was actually just recently in Uganda and was talking to government officials about how they're using this technology, and you know, they expressed a challenge, and that was that their ability to actually understand some of the data sets and sort of the need for capacity building. I'd be curious to know, I guess I would start with Nakata-san, your experience with JICA more broadly and the Japanese government in general, in terms of how are you helping local decision makers at different scales, national ministers of agriculture, or planning, or even at a village level, really interpret the data at different scales and for use to make the right decisions at the right level?
Right. I think Carrie just once, touched upon the necessity of the capacity development in order for them to use this data. And this is exactly, one area that we are very much struggling, and we are trying to do, even when we extend, the assistance in collaboration with JAXA. For example, one project that we do in Brazil is how we are able to help the local government or the Brazilian government to prevent the deforestation. And climate change is, of course, one of the core pillar of the JICA's activity. And there are many, our partner countries in the tropics that are suffering from the deforestation. And there are so many, reasons for deforestation, including acid rain or, the burn and slash agriculture technology. And one of the very very serious other kind of cause for the deforestation is illegal logging. And they are trying to, deter this illegal logging, try to, prevent deforestation. But unfortunately, they don't have much available information data in order to detect where those illegal logging are conducted, especially in a very constant, monitored way. And it is, especially from Brazil, in this very wide area of the Amazon, it is impossible for them to send those, the rangers manually and try to see where this illegal logging is conducted. So naturally, first they would like to use that, the satellite data. But the problem of those conventional satellite data is that when there are clouds on the sky, it is impossible for them to see the land. But luckily, JAXA developed one the sensor called ALOS, Advanced Land Observation Satellite. So, in this, by using ALOS, they are able to see through the clouds, even during the night, what is happening on the ground. So definitely, this is one big leap of technology. How the local government is able to use those advanced technology in order to solve their the issue of the illegal logging. But the problem is that since this is a kind of new technology, the local government, the Brazilian government, did not have enough capacity to analyze those data. So here, the JICA and the JAXA collaborate each other and we send so many experts to help them to acquire the skill to analyze those data. But this is still, this is a middle point. Once, even though those data have become available, then in order for them to use those data for the actual policing and monitoring activity, they must have more ground, on the ground, day-to-day governance type of activity, including collaboration between the federal police and the forest management agencies, collaboration with each local government, how they are able to, communicate those newly available data with the police, and how they are able to use those evidence for prosecution, those things. So unless those kind of, very basic governance capacity is, equipped with, they are not able to utilize those newly available data in order to meet these development goal. That is where the JICA jump in to help those Brazilian government. So those are a combination of very high-end satellite technology and very, I don't want to say low end, but on the ground, day-to-day governance type activity. Those should be combined in order to help them to actually utilize those data for their decision making or for their governance activities. So this is one kind of example that we are doing.
Great. I think that's a fantastic example of blending the advanced technologies and the evolution of our capacity to see what's happening on the ground as well as local technology. So Carrie, maybe you could give us an example of how USAID has worked on this, cracking that nut of capacity building, which is so critical. We can generate all sorts of data sets, but if it's not used by policymakers, then it's not a great use of resources. So tell us how USAID is doing it.
Sure. I think both points are really important to keep in mind. And one of the things that we continue to learn in my team, as well as experience working in the developing countries and trying to build capacity, is we have to start with what the question is that we're trying to answer. What is the development challenge we're trying to actually address? And it really has to start with that, because if we understand that, we're talking to local people to begin with. We're listening, we're observing, we're seeing what their own challenges actually are, and then we're responsible for figuring out how to fit what we have to offer into their world. And that's a bit of humility. I think Jack Dangerman was mentioning that as well in the previous panel. I have found that to be true. Sometimes we walk in thinking we've got all the flashy tools. And the reality is they may not work in the places that we're going to. So it starts with listening. What is the issue we're trying to solve for? And understanding the various, we say stakeholders in my world, but that means the people involved who are concerned with the issue. And it really takes a lot of creative thinking because most issues are really localized. And when we can find something that does work and do it well, one thing, and do it really well, the word will spread. Others will come and say, we heard that you're doing this. We want to see that. Can we alter it slightly to address this issue? And that builds a lot of the trust, which is so important. I know we talk about technology and data and satellites, and I love them, but there's no substitute of technology for building trust. And people won't take a risk and try something new, no matter how many trainings you give them, no matter how much capacity you try to build. There's got to be a trust there that they're willing to try something different than the way they've always been doing that. And we've found that to be true whether we're talking to people in a village at the local level or whether we're talking to government officials at the ministerial level. I could be talking with my colleagues around the world from here, and they've always done their assessments the same way. And so I'm coming to them and saying, wait, maybe I can help you with that a little bit. So it's a combination of factors, and it always starts with the people.
Great. I think that's a very, very important point, and to really understand the question that you're trying to answer is critical. So it sounds like trust can be a barrier. I'd like to hear, Haishan, from you, and share with us. You've been doing this for a long time. The World Bank has used this data for many, many years. What do you see as some of the barriers to really being able to utilize this technology in the way that it's meant to be for international development challenges?
Thank you. It's I think touched upon by the other speakers about the capacity, but capacity first of all among ourselves. I think the EO technology and applications have been evolving so fast. The sophistication is really increasing, and its range of applications has also been realized, but we not yet have the tapping into its full potentials as having the right tools and the proper standard, and also to transform the capacity or translate that into a real capacity on the ground. So we see the barrier, first of all, is that we ourselves need to gain more awareness and familiarity with the EO data's potential. And we also need to increase our own knowledge and skills in using them, and at the same time to support the availability through more open public access to the data, as well as setting the right standard to ensure that those data will be used in the right way at the right time. The second, that indeed in our engagement with our client countries, two things keep on recurring. One is indeed the government's own governance arrangement and analytical capacity in really understanding the data and gaining the insight and translate that into policy relevant decision making. Second is that in order for us to really integrate EO into more the regular statistical data generation process, we need to be very consistent in working together to provide that systematic and rigorous validating and ensuring, improvement along the way, and therefore combining that, anchoring that also into the ground truth kind of information we collect in other means. It's really, the potential is in its integration of those various data sources and can help us gain the most insight.
Great, thank you. So just to pick up on something a little bit, we've been talking about the different governments and challenges that we may have in using this data, but I'm curious about one thing. In countries where a government may not necessarily want to have radical transparency on what's happening in the country, how have you faced those situations, and how have you dealt with that situation on the ground in terms of using this data in a politically sensitive but yet open way to ensure that the information's getting to the people it needs to get to? Maybe Nakata-san, could you take that one?
Yeah, actually, this is a very difficult question. You're going to be very difficult one.
My job to ask difficult questions.
See, right, and definitely, you know, some of the data are very kind of sensitive. The government, you know, our partner government takes some of the data are very sensitive. They would not like to make it open, and of course. Unless, you know, our Western government agrees to it, of course we cannot force it. But definitely, when we start our cooperation, we should agree on certain kind of, you know, the condition that unless these conditions are not, you know, kind of satisfied, we are not able to do that, because, you know, even if we do the kind of assistance, that we not expected to generate sufficient kind of development outcome. And actually, one kind of, you know, kind of project JICA very frequently receive requests from our partner countries is actually the help to prepare a topographic map. And see, these, you know, kind of use the preparation of topographic map is very much basic of any kind of, you know, development project planning, including irrigation, or dam, or those things. But actually, it is very costly. And actually, I once, you know, been in that department which deals with, you know, infrastructure, the planning thing. And before that, I was not so sure. I didn't realize how costly it is. And so, since this is very costly, we very frequently receive requests from the government, and we selectively, you know, choose to extend our assistance for that aspect too, that kind of activity too. In that case, of course, we cannot, you know, make it force the government to make it public, because some of the government are very sensitive, consider those maps as very sensitive information from, you know, security or, you know, the military point of view. So we cannot, you know, force them to do it. But we definitely would like, you know, in order for these map can be used for the development purposes, at least those, you know, the maps should be shared among those developing agencies, including some development partners, and we try to encourage them to do so.
Great.
Maybe that's maybe something.
Okay, that's good. Carrie, do you have any examples from USAID you can share?
Sure. I think it's definitely a difficult challenge. I absolutely agree. When the need is evident to the stakeholders, to the people involved, people will share. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes a disaster. We happen to be having several of those around the world these days. Some of that is man-made, some of it is natural, but we have found that when there has been resistance in the past to share data sets across borders, for example, sometimes it could be within our own country between government ministries. The moment a disaster strikes and everybody has to come together to survive and bring every asset, the sharing of data comes forward. Now, I don't advocate creating a disaster just for the purpose of demonstrating the value of data sharing. But those moments really do break open the resistance sometimes. And it's important, if you are a believer in data-driven decision-making and curation of good management of data, that we take advantage of these moments to be able to, let's not lose the data that gets created while everybody's responding to the crisis. Let's make sure we are in a position to reuse that as we need it in the future and build upon it. And of course, respond to the disaster. But if we're going to be responsible in our domain, we need to also recognize that those are opportunities to go back when things settle, the dust settles, and remind people, you know what, we couldn't actually respond very effectively with search and rescue teams after the earthquake if we did not already have an investment in data sharing. So we were able to demonstrate this certainly with the response to the earthquake in Nepal. We had been involved with creating new data with local people on the ground, tracing features from satellite imagery well in advance of that earthquake. That information was shared publicly in an experiment that we were doing with the World Bank, in fact. It was on a platform known as OpenStreetMap. Some of you may have heard of that. And that data was open and available, but specific to certain parts of Nepal and Kathmandu. But after that earthquake happened, the outpouring of volunteer mappers around the world to create new data from satellite imagery pre-earthquake was instrumental in being provided to the search and rescue teams that went immediately in the aftermath. And that data is being built upon today by many others in the long-term recovery efforts and response efforts in the country of Nepal. So I would say that's an opportunity to look at. Again, it's still not an easy nut to crack, though.
Great. Yeah, would you like to?
Another example, since she said talk about open data. See, I just talked about Brazil case, and we, JAXA and JICA supported that, the kind of map or satellite data of deforestation. And after that, we received requests from many other countries like Indonesia, Peru, DRC, Mozambique, those countries. So the JAXA and the JICA decided rather than doing that kind of assistance for each country, JAXA can do that kind of automated processing of the satellite data, and why not make it open data? So we have established one website we call the JJ-FAST, some kind of forest early morning type system, and for every 6 weeks JAXA do this the data processing, and this is made public, open data. So anybody can access those the forest data even from via smartphone. So that kind of making that open data platform could be one good way to make those data transparent.
Great. Yeah, Carrie, go
I
ahead.
have one last thing that you just made me think of that I wanted to share. One of the things that we're doing inside AID is not just having a technical team do the analyses, but we're also recognizing that to truly transform the development enterprise, we have to have the policies in place within the agency about how we do our business. So my team is in the midst of formulating now internal geospatial data policies that will be in the future, near future, coming to a procurement near you, embedded language in every future award that says, if you are receiving funding from this agency, these are the standards that the data will have to have, geospatial data, and we want to receive it back, and we then go curate it, and we must make that available to the very public who is funding it through the American people. So clearly we have standards we're putting in place. We never want to share personally identifiable information. We take that very seriously. We all understand with data breaches happening now all over the world how important this actually is in this digital data era in which we all live. But those policies are in the midst of being developed. They will be rolled out in the coming months. I'm saying months, not years, months. And so that's part of the leadership role we're trying to play within our own agency, but also in the international development community. We're trying to see if this is going to work. Can we really do this, and can we transform the entire international development enterprise along this line of thinking?
Great. That's really exciting. Haishan, did you want to add?
Just very quickly, while we are trying to overcome the political economy regarding how to open data, especially from the government, we need to recognize there already is so much information available, but need to be made much more easily accessible in open format or publicly, so that we can really tap into the potential of this data. So in this regard, we really support GEO's plan to make your vast amount of data repository much more accessible, including maybe working together through a new data sharing platform the World Bank developed and will be launched next month in 2 weeks' time, which will try to make data, be it survey, census, or geospatial data, much more easily accessed and used, and also, to the extent possible, to make them open and public. So I think this is where we can really work together.
Great. Well, I'm really heartened to hear about sort of this global movement to almost democratize collection of Earth observation data. I was just in Tasmania last week and saw a protected area manager actually collecting data on their smartphone using Google Street View and using that to actually monitor vegetation. It was really interesting. Never seen that before. But how do you see this kind of democratization, if you will, in open source? Are governments that you're working with on this raising any ethical concerns, privacy concerns, and if so, what are you doing to address those and alleviate those concerns? Who wants to start that one? Carrie? Uh-oh, Nakata-san saying no.
Sure, I'll try that. I'm very glad you brought this up, because one of the things that, as a development agency, we work all over the world. But we respect the fact that data belongs to the country that it came from. So we're never trying to share information that could do damaging things. It's not always possible in advance, though, to know what can be done. So we're all kind of learning in this era of digital data, I think, right now, in this data revolution. We do take precautions. We try to be very upfront when we're conducting programs in countries that our partners from the country with whom we work are participating in that data collection. We don't do data collection for the sake of data collection. We're usually implementing a development project. It could be a health project where we're trying to improve potable water, access to water. It could be something in which we're working in clinics to improve maternal and child newborn care. It could be education programs targeting girls' education. All the different kinds of things that we do in international development, we've been using data for many years. It just may not have been collected and managed, put into digital form to be reused even by ourselves. So I would say we're doing our best to learn and create best practices along the way, always keeping in mind that the most, having the greatest integrity for what we're doing is at the forefront of our minds. Nobody who's in international development wants to do something that inadvertently harms the very people they're there to help. But we honestly, we're living in a digital world, and we're all discovering almost every day something that was intended for good might be used for bad. And so we're learning with the international community. We don't have all the answers ourselves. This is why it's so important, I think, for us to have fora like this to best understand. I think the importance, though, is to recognize that we clearly communicate and don't surprise a country by publishing their data on a site that they didn't know about in advance, and they discover it in a way that doesn't feel so good to them. But we're learning as we go, and this is definitely a priority for us to figure out.
Great. So, Haishan, the World Bank works with probably every country in this room, and I'd be curious to know, in your experience, a lot of countries are very advanced in their use of this technology, but maybe others are newer to using it in making development decisions at a national or subnational level. I'd be curious to know if you have any advice for countries in your work and things that you've learned along the way as to how you could help the individuals in these rooms to go back and help their governments to use this data in the most effective way.
Yeah. Thank you very much. First of all, let me just quickly add to what Carrie said about the open data, because in our case, we also indeed, in making open what we have in our hand, we clearly have legal agreement on the terms of use and reuse. We also help to develop the tools and the standard in helping to anonymize microdata to protect the confidentiality, the privacy issue. And so there's indeed the need to have common standard and also the technical solutions. When it comes to how we can support countries to really tap into this potential, we see that, first of all, we ourselves need to really stay on the curve, understanding its potentials, understanding its use, and helping to support the development of the applications. And in this regard, I must say that we have taken a page from USAID's book by creating internally a bank community of practice of professionals in this geospatial area. We have also created a geospatial operational support team. We call them GHOST, but they're by no means ghosts because we have colleagues actually sitting here. They're very visible in supporting our country team when they're engaging with countries, how to bring in the possibility of integrating EO information in doing the assessment, in influencing the decision making. Another thing I think which is very, very important is that we need to look at supporting, first of all, those countries that don't even have some of the most basic capacity in generating some of the most conventional data, how we can support them to continue bringing new technology to do things better. For example, at the bank, we support IDA countries to do household survey every 3 years so that we have regular multi-purpose survey provide information to monitor poverty and other well-being. But here, by investing in new solutions such as tablet-based data generation system, by linking up to cloud solutions and providing those countries with limited capacity the infrastructure and the technical solution that they can really adopt on a much more cost-effective basis would allow them to improve the general regular data collection. But at the same time, we also need to support the data innovation, especially the applications of the EO data that can solve some specific problems. I'm glad to hear the previous panel was talking about indeed connecting the possible solutions to a specific problem in local levels, not just directed by big, venture capital interest to help that. And this is also where bank is dedicating in channeling some financing to support data innovation in linking not only government statistical system with private sector and civil societies and really forge a new possibility of exploring innovative solutions. For example, last year when we awarded among 470 applications, some of the top proposals, one of which is to use geospatial EO information to help improve the refugee populations, monitoring their movement and providing the adequate support, or in Southeast Asia in terms of illegal fishing. A lot of those solutions will come by really looking at what from the community they detect problems, and then we can connect them with the technology from other partners. And here also I want to recognize that bank has been really working so closely with so many of you, including the European Space Agencies, USAID, JICA, and many others in really advancing our own understanding and also to define what would be appropriate approach we can take to countries to support them.
Great.
So international cooperation is so important. That's why GEO is so promising.
Fantastic. Any other interventions on that point?
Sure. I wanted to just pick up on and recognize that the World Bank has had an incredible investment in the creation of data. And Haishan just mentioned this. There are these livelihood studies that are household survey data sets that are collected in many countries in which USAID also works. My team uses that information. The demographic information that comes from that is golden. So I want to give you a quick example of how we've taken that kind of data and turned it into a decision. In the country of Bangladesh, the U.S. government has a program called Feed the Future. It's working in many countries. It's the government's food security program, and we work in Bangladesh. And a couple of years ago, my team was working with colleagues in our field office in Dhaka. And we used the livelihoods data that the World Bank published, called the LSMS. We combined it with some demographic and health survey data that USAID also funds the creation of. We discovered some interesting things. So one of those was that in the northeast part of the country, known as Sylhet Division, we were finding something that was a bit of an anomaly after analyzing this information. We realized that that part of the country, which is a big agricultural production area, had the highest stunting rates in the whole country. Stunting is a measure in the health and nutrition sector to best understand whether children are receiving both quantity and quality, a diversity in their nutrition intake. So high stunting is not good. Why was it that we were seeing high stunting rates in a part of the country that had such high agriculture production? It wasn't clear, but we were finding significant correlations that we couldn't actually explain the reason for. Another interesting thing was that normally we expect to see high stunting rates among girls as compared to boys. In this case, it was higher with boys as compared to girls. These were interesting questions. Hundreds were generated. When we took this back to our colleagues in the capital, in Dhaka, what happened was my team had a series of maps, and we were showing different kinds of information. This was one of them. Here's the interesting thing. All of our programs for food security are in the southern part of the country. Now, I'm sure there's good reason for it, and I'm not in any position to question that. But no one at the time we were implementing and deciding where to implement those programs had had that kind of information first. Now for the next round, they will. Here's what happened. When we brought the maps back, the maps are just the result of an analysis. They're not the final. It gets the conversation going. We had a room full of people that had agriculture extension agents. We had food security specialists in the room. We had education specialists in the room. Because this analysis also found that higher literacy rates of households where girls had attended school were less likely to be vulnerable to food insecurity. Was that confusing the way I said that? Okay, I'm going to try that again. Households that had girls with a minimum amount of literacy, schooling, were less vulnerable to food shocks. It's a better way to say it. We didn't see the why, but that got the education people in the room. We also had the gender experts in the room. A lot of different experts in international development were in a room together looking at a common picture. It got them thinking, why might this be? And of course, we had people from Bangladesh in the room who can know the culture and understand a bit more. What's the culture like in the northeast part of the country as compared to perhaps the southern part of the country? The conversations that happened had never happened before. And this is a result of an investment that the World Bank has made in data that is now being opened, analyzed, not just by my team, but research in universities around the world, and being combined, in fact, also with satellite imagery to better understand what areas are electrified, where are the night lights, and what are not. The kinds of analyses we can do because of this forward-leaning investment is really not even fully explored yet. But I can tell you that our own decision-making with an idea about where we invest in the future for specific areas in our Feed the Future program will definitely be affected by this kind of work.
Great. That's a fantastic example. And I guess I will just ask a quick follow-up. Did that process, getting everyone in the room, really analyzing what the data was telling them, did that lead to a change in Bangladesh or a redirection of development aid to where the variables work together?
So it stimulated such an interesting conversation that it didn't just stop with the country of Bangladesh. We've now done 6 additional similar type of analyses for other USAID field offices because they were seeing what was going on in that country. So we've done it for Uganda, we've done it for Ethiopia, we've done it in Rwanda, we've done it Niger. I mean, the countries go on. And each time we're looking at specific things based on the questions that the development experts in the field are asking us. And I'm looking at what are some of the trends we're seeing across all, because those are the kinds of things that I want to understand. So it's kicked off conversations not just in Bangladesh, but back here in Washington with our experts here to recognize that we say data-driven decision-making is what we're trying to strive for, and I think that's true. The truth is no decision's ever going to be fully driven by just the data. We have many factors that drive decisions, but now being able to show evidence about what's going on, it's catching on, and it's starting a conversation at many different levels throughout the agency. whether or not it affected that specific program in one country.
Great. Well, I think another important point there is it's also demand-driven data collection. So you're listening to what people want and collecting the data that they need to answer those questions. So I think that's fantastic. So last panel of the day, we're going to make sure that you all get a chance to contribute to this conversation. I want to ask first if there are any interventions from any organization or country in the room at this time. I know it's been a busy day and lots of questions up here. This is your chance if you would like to make an intervention. Just please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Anyone? Okay. Yes, please. Gentleman from China.
This moment, take the floor. Let me just make some small observations. Certainly, this is excellent discussions, and three panelists, in addition to chair, has made great contribution to the subject matter. In fact, every people here would appreciate already the international financing institutions and bilateral donors, assistance agencies have gone long way and done great deal in assisting developing countries in terms of poverty alleviation, in terms of education, in terms of emergency relief operations, you just name it. Now, maybe my question is that how would three of you think your priority can also be identified in line with the Earth observations or this geo community by large at two levels. One is geo itself, and second is the member of geos. For instance, at the geos, is there any possibility that your institution would be able to work together with geos, such as sending your experts to work in geo secretariat to assist the geos in their delivering services to the member countries, as you already done in other places. Particularly, I think, like JICA and USAID. This is one. And second, at the country level, whether your institution will be able to work with members of GEOs through bilateral or bilateral multilateral cooperation combined with like South-South cooperation resources, do some specific project in terms of realization of sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So why don't we hold that question for now, and at this point we will open it up for questions, but I want to hear if there's any interventions, any statements that anyone wants to make. The United States, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There's a short intervention followed by a question that I think builds on our Chinese colleagues' question and could be answered by many people. So the joint NASA USAID Surveyor program that Carrie Stokes mentioned builds capacity through multilateral partnerships in and between Asia, Africa, and soon South America. This assists and it strengthens national and subnational decision makers in their regions, and it increases their capability to apply Earth observations to development challenges. So Surveyor's recent global expansion was actually made possible in the United States as a direct result of involvement with GEO and GEOS. So the question here is, are there any other such examples or other comments about Surveyor, but examples of multilateral development consortia that have benefited directly from GEO and GEOS?
Great, thank you. I think we have one more intervention from Japan. Where are you, Japan?
One intervention.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Thank you, Chairman. We are very happy to know the very good collaboration between the World Bank, JICA, USAID, and space agencies and Earth observation community. But my question is to introduce this Earth observation into the various fields, including the water, health, food. In that case, we need to know some expertise. As the previous session was discussed, so some modeling and understanding of each expertise are needed for creating the good service. So how can you promote such kind of the collaboration in addition to the collaboration with space agencies?
Great. Okay, so we are hearing interventions and questions, so we're collecting the questions. I think we have a couple more interventions. Agromet, did I say that right?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to give one example of the application of or implementation of survey in West Africa. We are a member of GEO just this year, and we are conducting or coordinating the survey in West Africa. What I want to highlight is the survey West Africa, our priority is the capacity building. All the services we are providing is a kind of co-development between our technicians and the experts of NASA. So we will be able, after providing the service, to upscale the service at the national level or in another country. That's just what I want to highlight as a good example of survey in West Africa. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I have Isimad. I'm probably saying that wrong.
Yeah.
There you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Basanta Shrestha from International Center for Integrated Mountain Development based in Kathmandu, Nepal. There had been many references to Nepal case, and also we represent Servir HKS from Indo-Himalayan region perspective. I just would like to make a couple of statements here. I think in addition to what Carrie Stoke mentioned, there are also a number of other success stories in terms of utilizing Earth observation and the geospatial technologies. For example, forest fire monitoring system in Nepal, which has been replicated in other member states like Bhutan, land use land cover, decadal land use land cover that is leading to a RED plus MRB system, not to mention the Nepal earthquake response, which has led to even humanitarian GIS award by Jack Denserman in 2015 in terms of innovative use of GIS and Earth observation technologies. ICIMOD as a knowledge organization has a long track record of utilizing Earth observation and geospatial technology. We specialize on the mountain environment, so I think due to ruggedness, inaccessibility, and also the kind of challenges that we face in a mountain environment, we feel that Earth observation is one of the tools to gain access to our understanding about the mountain ecosystem and the complexities of the challenges that we face. So programs like Servir provides innovative technologies, tools, and approaches to enhance our understanding of many of the critical issues that we deal on a fragile mountain ecosystem, which leads to some of the meaningful action, meaningful policy and practices, both at the regional level and also the national level. For example, issues surrounding to climate change, disaster risk reduction, biodiversity conservation, air pollution monitoring, and many others. But I think the kind of international development that we have been able to gain traction on as an institution, it has not only enhanced our effectiveness of our program in terms of understanding and in terms of enabling action, but also provided a very competitive edge to our organization as an institution. But some of the points that I just would like to highlight in terms of the international development is sometimes we also need to strike a balance, sometimes supply-driven and the demand-driven aspect. So I think we have looked at more from the demand-driven, but there are also challenges when the technologies like Earth observation and others, whether it is supply-driven and the demand-driven.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your intervention. If I could just move, we've got a couple more here.
Yeah.
IASA, where are you?
Here.
In the back? Okay, great.
My name is Steffen Fritz. I'm from the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IASA, and we have just recently been involved in poverty mapping. And you mentioned also the word poverty mapping. It's really an important field. But what we are discovering, what is missing on the data side is the digital household survey data made available, the LS-MS data, which is made available by the World Bank. And I'm thinking there are so many development agencies like USAID, like International Fund for Agricultural Development, like World Food Program. They're all doing household surveys, and I'm wondering if there couldn't be more of this data be made available, such as the DHS data, for example, and what your thoughts are about how this can be enforced and happen. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And then I think our final comment from Australia.
Thank you, Stuart Minchin from Australia. I just wanted to touch on one of the big successes of GEO, which we should not forget, the ability for GEO to bring the convening power and to incubate initiatives that show promise, and that is the Global Forest Observation Initiative. So that started very small within the GEO community, with Australia and Norway starting off, in effect, a very small engagement to start demonstrating that we could track our forests from Earth observations from space. The convening power of GEO allowed us to bring that back to the table after a year of effort, and other countries and participating organisations jumped on board and grew that effort into the forest carbon tracking task. Those countries and participating organisations then continued to work together and brought it back to the table and created the Global Forest Observation Initiative. And now it's graduated, if you like, and moved into operations within the FAO. And this is a really effective tool, and it's something that you don't get in the UN, for example. You can't just do something between two countries in the UN and incubate it in this way. GEO gives you a tool to allow successful work to actually grow to become global systems, and so in answer to the question from both China and the suggestion from the US around Severe, I think this is our core value proposition to the international development community.
Fantastic. I think that's a wonderful comment. The ability of this data to be available for everyone and as a platform for us all to work together more effectively. So thank you for that. That's incredibly important. I won't mention that GEO, you're about the UN. I think that maybe we should have GEO be used more effectively in the UN system to get the governments to work together effectively. So let me pick up on one of those questions. So the non-severe examples, which I think we'll pick up the question from China, this ability to collaborate. Is there another example maybe from one of my panelists here that you'd like to raise as to the use of those collaborative tools outside of the Severe platform?
So if I understood the question, I'll be honest. So for many years, I've been a participant in the GEO community, but I was really the only representative of a development agency in those early days. I am looking for my people. I'd love to see more participation of the bilateral donors participate. I mean, it would be wonderful. I think it could be really useful for the GEO community to have a better connection to what the development world is struggling with on a day-to-day basis. So I couldn't be more pleased to be standing, or sitting, I guess, over here on this panel with my colleagues. I think this is a start. I'd like to see more of it.
Great. Any other comments? Nakata-san?
Right. And see, definitely, as Carrie said, at least my world and their world, they're two different kind of world. Probably, if you talk each other for your business and geo and everything, maybe even if you are speaking Japanese, maybe I feel that you are speaking Chinese. I don't understand what you discuss. So the best way, so we need to be able to become, to speak in the common language that we can, discuss each other. I can understand what kind of technologies are available on your side, and I would like you to understand what kind of the development issues we have, and not probably this is a two-way, including partner countries. This should be kind of a three-way discussion. What kind of demand is there? What kind of the supply is there? And what kind of financing or expertise are there? And by doing that kind of starting from maybe starting a brainstorming type thing, then we will be able to pick up some of the feasible way to apply those high-end technology for day-to-day different issues. But one thing which is very much the business kind of concern for us is that the innovative approach, by definition, it involves some kind of risks, risk of failure, and so there should be some level of tolerance for allowing this kind of failure. Even if this is a failure, we should feel that this is kind of one step for the next, the second stage, third stage of the development. Unless that kind of the tolerance is there, it is very difficult to experiment those kind of new innovative approaches. So I think, unfortunately, the public sector is not so high for the tolerance because we are always subject to the, scrutiny by the Board of Audit, or since we are using taxpayers' money. So how we are able to have that kind of level of tolerance for risk is one thing we have to figure out in order to make these new kind of collaboration just we started today for actual application stage.
Great. Haishan, do you want to take the question specifically on the LSMS data?
Definitely. Indeed, to support countries to open up or make their data much more accessible to the wider user community is one of the priorities bank is pursuing. And here I'm just very happy to see that the UN Social Commission, which is the highest body of official statistical system in the world, has taken on this topic in a much more proactive way, starting with a very intensive discussion at UN Social Commission through a side event, and continue to develop that. I think this really require not only we come together to recognize the potential of making data much more publicly accessible while dealing technically and legally with any privacy issues, but also to provide the basic tool and standard to allow that to happen will be very, very critical. So I totally agree with this gentleman's comment, and we will work with our colleagues in USAID in terms of learning from the DHS experience and continue to see how we can also support LSMS and other survey and information can be made much more accessible. And on the dialogue and collaboration opportunities, I cannot support more of what you two have said. But in this regard, it's so nice to see this dialogue is happening, and also I think in GEO, first of all, engage globally with the new Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, which is really a big new experiment in how we can bring ourselves together, the government statistical system with the private sector data generators to NGOs and academia and development partners. So that itself is a forum for us to explore where we can focus on designing some very concrete collaboration. And also it's very good to see a lot of the bilateral discussions has been going on, and for example, we have been really exploring how to work with GEO community and tap into the data repository you have, and combine with the rich amount of survey, census, and other type of data that we can look into for what specific development issues that integrating those data could offer new insight. So that's one of the directions that we're pursuing. And of course, there's so much more in terms of country capacity development in this fast evolving area. While we ourselves is trying to catch up, we also need to learn from each other where we can do what in the best way possible. So I think we're open to the ideas you have put forward.
Yeah.
Let's focus on exploring the concrete ways to.
Great. Well, I think that's a fantastic note to close on, in the spirit of collaboration. We are now officially between you and happy hour, so I want to make sure that we wrap this up, and I want to really thank our panelists. Carrie, you have a quick last comment, closing comment?
Sure, I do. On this topic of collaboration and open data and sharing, I think I'd like to just remind everybody that 50% of the world's population is under the age of 30. We have got to engage the youth. And the youth already are connected, and they're already using devices like this every day. They're probably sleeping with it because they can't separate from it. They're collecting data because it's fun, and it's how they connect with each other across the world. I think we have an incredible opportunity as a GEO community as we look to the future together about how to really find ways to engage in the youth, because they love collecting information and they're willing to start sharing it. There are programs out there that are doing this. One is called Youth Mappers, and it involves young people in universities. They are being provided with the tools online to use satellite imagery, trace the features in their communities, share that on an open platform, OpenStreetMap, and it empowers them to feel like they're connected and they're having a voice in their world by mapping it. So it's one program, but I think we should challenge ourselves to think how we can bring more of the young people into this community, because I think they also come with a mentality that's maybe not the same that we have, and they're already sharing in everything that they do. Sometimes they share too much, but that's something for us to think about as we move forward into the future.
Great. All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And I really want to thank my panelists. These individuals and their institutions are really on the cutting edge of, as you heard today, of this exciting work of linking this technology with decision-making about international development. So thank you all so much. Greatly appreciate it. I think a round of applause for the last panel. And now we're going to close it up.
And I guess we are, and thank you very much, Jennifer, for leading this great panel and the panel as well. Now, I don't know if John Firth, if John Firth is still in the house, we were going to have just a quick recap. If I know everybody's eager to get away, so it can be really brief. But we thank the panel. If you want to stick around or step off, that's either way is fine. But that's John getting tucked in over there at the moment. So while he comes up, I'll just say, and stick around. I guess these are three very different panels. Please come on up, John. So if I will, and I'll ask you to comment as well. They were sort of trying to find a way to synopsize these in a minute or so. I would say one word for each. The first one was about diversity. The second one was about humility, and the third one's about integration. On the diversity side, we heard from small and large countries and nations, different viewpoints, different perspectives, different paces of integration and communication. And that's what we see here, is we have to learn to tailor our language and our ears to the different communities we deal with. On the humility side, if everybody didn't hear that, is we have to listen. We have to hear what the users need, not what we have to sell, and to listen again, and to realize that our best answer is not their solution, but to be ready to change our solution to what they think in the dialogue that takes place. And I think what we heard here was the integration side, which is starting, I think, Carrie in particular, starting with a question which didn't have a data set or an answer necessarily, but why are they doing this? Why is this happening? And then letting the data lead you to the right information and then to solutions, which brought in new data sets across the board. So, but understanding that's the objective, is the end state, is to solve a problem, not to develop a platform. And I think that's where our objective should be, to solve problems with the information we have and make the platform just transparent. That's not the point. That's not the solution. That's a delivery to the end state. But the integration of all these, as represented by this panel here, I think was really the end of the day in a very productive way. And not just my observation, but comments from...
Great. I mean, I think the only thing I would add to that, as we just closed on, was this idea of youth citizen science and sort of the democratization of the data and how we do that effectively so that it's user-friendly, transparent, but also can really drive decision-making in a robust way. So I think that was just one add-on to your very well-done summary of the panel. John?
This was sprung on me, actually. I thought I was going to have
Me
a rest after this. But I was quickly scribbling down here take-home points that I got, and actually stopped at 3 pages of take-home notes. So, but I think, there's some interesting things here, and I was struck by, I think it was you, Carrie, said about 50% of the world's population is under 30. And we're missing a trick. And somebody, I think it was Vicky Pope I was talking to at break, if we want to mobilize geo data, why aren't there people under 30 here? They're actually the guys and girls who are developing the actual apps to take this forward. Because otherwise, and I'm not being critical or cruel, the data is just sitting with the data generators. And we really have to start going down this innovation stage. And I was also struck again by, some of the comments from the private sector panel about encourage innovation in this space. Why isn't GEO thinking about creating these innovation hubs that actually encourage under 30s to start doing and using data in a way we've never imagined? And I think that was a pretty powerful message. There's loads more here as well, but...